All right, so let's start this broadcast with some breaking news that in fact just come in from the United States of America, where the American President Donald Trump has made a pretty big statement. Trump has said that he has ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in appropriate regions. Now, this statement comes from the American president amidst his war of words with the Russian president and also the former Russian president and the current Deputy Chairman of Russia's Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev. Now, Trump has said in the same social media post that this move comes in response to Medvedev's quote-unquote foolish and inflammatory statements. On Thursday, Dmitry Medvedev had hit out at Trump, warning the American president to quote-unquote remember that Moscow possesses Soviet-era nuclear strike capabilities of last resort. The Russian leader's remarks have come after Trump told him to watch his words. Now, Washington's move also comes shortly after the Russian President Vladimir Putin made a pretty big announcement, talking alongside the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Putin earlier in the day had said that Russian and the Belarusian military experts have been preparing positions for the Oreshnik missile to be deployed in Belarus by the end of this year. So this, of course, is the big development that has now taken place, because remember, just a few hours ago, it was Vladimir Putin who announced that the Russians will be deploying their latest and one of the most critical weapons that the Russians have in their arsenal, the Oreshnik missile, which is a nuclear-capable missile. And the Russian president said that by the end of this year, Oreshnik would be positioned in Belarus. And the American president, in a post on Truth Social a little while back, has now said that the Americans will be stationing 2 nuclear submarines in suitable locations. He's not specified as to where these nuclear submarines are to be positioned by the Americans, but it is pretty clear that there is a tit-for-tat escalation that is taking place, where after the Russians said that they would be stationing and deploying their Oreshnik missiles in Belarus, this is the American response, where the Americans have now said that the American president has now said that the Americans will station their nuclear submarines, 2 of them, in suitable positions. So this, of course, is the latest development that has come in, where the American president, in a post on Truth Social, has said that the United States of America will be stationing 2 nuclear submarines. Bear in mind, the American president, who started off his presidency by being very friendly with the Russian president, seems to have suffered up a bit on Vladimir Putin. He's had several rounds of phone calls with the Russian president. Donald Trump was very optimistic at the beginning, where he was hoping that he could bring about some kind of a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine as soon as you take charge at the White House. But that clearly has not happened, because what is now happening, it started off with the war of words. The Russians in the talks, the Russian president in the talks with Donald Trump, had verbally said a number of interesting and important things. Donald Trump had, of course, been saying that the talks are going really, really well, but each time the talks between the American president and the Russian president would conclude, the Russians would, of course, intensify their attacks in Ukraine. And my colleague Susan Tehrani is joining us from New York. Susan, this, of course, is a pretty big development coming right after the Russian president announced that Russia would be stationing its Oreshnik missiles in Belarus. The American president putting out this post on his Truth Social account saying that America will be stationing 2 of its nuclear submarines in suitable locations. What are we to make of this?
Right. The president said on Truth Social that, quote, I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. He did say that he ordered the submarines moved, quote, just in case. As I mentioned, these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than that. Words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances. Trump, of course, did this in response to not only Russia's recent actions, but also Medvedev, who used to be Russia's president, is now the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council. he traded taunts in recent days after President Trump on Tuesday said that Russia had 10 days from today to agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine or be hit along with his oil buyers with sanctions and tariffs as well. Regarding the Ukraine war, Moscow set out its own terms when it comes to peace in Ukraine, and it appears that, at this time relations are at an all-time low because it has shown no signs that it wants to comply with Trump's deadline.
Trump, of course, had given a deadline. He revised the deadline saying that he wants to give the Russians 10 to 12 days. But this announcement is interesting because it's come right after the Russian President Vladimir Putin also saying that he'll be deploying the Oreshnik missile in Belarus. This was a Russian plan that had been unveiled a few months before as well, but he reiterated that statement again when he met with the Belarusian president. But the fact that Donald Trump started off his presidency by saying that he could, of course, solve this Ukraine crisis, bring an end to the bloodshed in Ukraine, stop this war within 24 hours, and he was hoping that Vladimir Putin, after his talks with him, would, of course, change his position. But what has clearly happened is Donald Trump, it appears, has gone from talking peace to now saying that he is deploying 2 nuclear submarines in suitable positions. This is a complete U-turn in terms of the position that the American president has taken.
But on the other hand, Medvedev made a very lewd threat saying that, in not so many words on social media, that the United States forgets that Russia is a nuclear power. So that itself was provocative in the eyes of the United States. And Medvedev has generally emerged as one of the Kremlin's most outspoken anti-Western hawks since the war began in Ukraine. I think it'll be interesting to see how the meeting between Steve Witkoff, President Trump's special envoy, is going to go with Russian officials in Russia. This is very interesting that he's decided to take this trip immediately after visiting the Middle East region. So I think we're going to see more developments unfolding during the weekend.
Indeed, we will, of course, wait and watch as to what the developments, of course, are. But this is a crucial and in many ways qualitatively a very different sort of a development. Some would, of course, say that this, of course, is the hardening of the American position, which is now transpired in the American president clearly stating that the Americans will, of course, be deploying 2 of their nuclear submarines in suitable positions. And we now need to wait and watch as to where this, of course, is headed. So remember earlier, the Russian president had clearly pointed out that Russia will be positioning its Oreshnik hypersonic missile. It is a completely different kind of weapon which the Russian president had been talking about. And now the Americans are saying that they will be deploying 2 of their nuclear submarines in suitable positions. Now, keep in mind, the Americans are not directly involved in the war, not yet. The Americans have been sending weapons. The Americans have been providing the Ukrainians with intelligence. The Americans have been giving military aid to Ukraine in this war so far. But the fact that the American president is now saying that the United States will deploy 2 of its nuclear submarines, what is to be read into the subtext of what the American president is saying is going to be very, very interesting. And my colleague Susan Tehrani is with us from New York. Susan, considering the heightened rhetoric that, of course, had been coming in from the former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, the fact that he was talking and harping on again and again about the Russian nuclear weapons, but this is something that Russia had been doing repeatedly right from the outset of this war. Why is that statement by Dmitry Medvedev being seen as having crossed the line by Donald Trump?